There are a lot of fighting games and beat 'em ups on the SNES. You got games like Mortal Kombat, Street Fighter, Final Fight, Fatal Fury, and even Turtles in Time. Yet with all the good ones, there's of course games that are, well, not so good. Ultraman is one of those not so good games. Ultraman is a Japanese show that featured gigantic monsters and a plague that harassed Earth. From what I've read, there's several iterations of the show and each has a different way that Ultraman is created. From what I understand, the first one has Ultraman accidentally destroying some police officer's vehicle, killing him. In order to save the human, Ultraman merges with him, so now the undead officer turns into Ultraman by flipping a switch. Ultraman is a huge humanoid character that beats the shit out of Godzilla-sized creatures, which is a focus on the game based on him. The thing is that when I looked into the story of the game, it's completely different. In this one, Ultraman takes on the alter ego of Jack Shindo because Ultraman, in his native form, can't survive in the Earth's atmosphere for more than 3 minutes. It's a bit different, but we'll just have to roll with it. So let's move on to the actual game. When pressing start on the title screen, you're treated to a versus screen, showing what Ultraman is tasked with punching for that stage. After this, a little scene plays of Ultraman growing to his signature height. For a game released in 1991, this was pretty impressive for the relatively new SNES. Unfortunately, you're forced to watch it between every fight, and it's exactly the same each and every time. In addition to this, it's unskippable. Thankfully, it only lasts a few seconds. After that little display is finished, it's on to the fight, and here's what you see that Ultraman isn't so ultra. It's just a simple one-on-one fighting game, but after throwing a few strikes, you'll find out that pretty much everything about the game is as stiff as it can be. Let me tell you how the controls work, which are part of the problem. B throws a punch, and A throws a kick. That's fine. Y throws a projectile, depending on which one you have selected and how much power you have. More on that a little bit later. But to confuse you endlessly, up is not used to jump, just like almost every other beat 'em up like this. Instead, up alters your kick and your punch. When you hold up and punch, Ultraman throws an uppercut. When you press up and kick, he performs a spinning kick. For this game, X is used to jump. That just doesn't feel natural when almost every game I've ever played that was a fighter used up to jump. Granted, you do eventually get used to it, but it still feels really odd. But what if you press up and jump? Well, Ultraman will rocket about a mile into the air and come down. Somewhere. It's hard to direct Ultraman in the air like this. If you hold down a direction, he will often offshoot your preferred landing area. If you don't press it enough, you may come down directly in front of where you actually jumped. In addition, jumping strikes are actually hard to land. You have to time your attack and get just the right length of jump in order to actually do any damage. In addition, you have to hope that the enemy doesn't hit you on the way down, as they typically will. In addition, your standard strikes are difficult to land. This is because compared to the enemy monsters, Ultraman's range sucks. Oftentimes, you'll get hit about 4 or 5 times before you can land in one punch or kick. To make matters even worse, the enemy AI will throw projectiles often, and these can only really be countered by either rolling or backflipping away, or by summoning a little shield. Once again though, the issue with this is the timing. Rolling is only done when pressing down forward, and just because you're doing this doesn't mean that Ultraman is invulnerable to attack. Instead, this just lets Ultraman get closer to the enemy faster. It's a risky move. But how about that shield? Is it any more reliable? Not at all. It takes far too long to bring up this shield, so by the time you realize that an attack is coming, that shield won't come up in time. You have to anticipate your enemy spitting fire at you and pressing up and Y quickly to make sure the barrier comes up in time. Again, it's mostly a waste of time. Really, the most reliable non-projectile attack is the grappling throw you can form. By getting close enough to give the enemy a hug, Ultraman will grab them. You then have a split second to either press B to do a chop, or A to throw the big mass across the stage. This throwing attack seems to do the most damage, but in later battles it can be nearly impossible to get that close to perform the attack. Because of that, you may have to rely on the projectile attacks, which is the most complicated part of the game. You can see a small vertical meter constantly charging. This is Ultraman's power meter. As it rises, stronger energy blasts can be thrown, shown by the 4 levels. When they light up, they are usable. You press L and R to cycle between these attacks, and then Y throws it. The level 1 attack, called a knuckle shooter, does the least amount of damages, but also uses the least amount of energy. The level 4 attack, burning plasma, does a huge chunk of damage, but requires a full energy meter. So why not just focus defensively and throw 2 or 3 burning plasmas to kill the alien monster? Well, there's several reasons for this. For one, both Ultraman and the enemy regenerate their life slowly when not being damaged. This wouldn't be a huge issue if it wasn't for the requirement that you need to finish off your enemy with a full blast of burning plasma. This is denoted by the finish designation in the enemy's life bar when it's depleted. You then have to throw the plasma at the enemy to effectively finish it off. You have to throw it when finish is shown, otherwise, it doesn't count. For example, say that the enemy has about 10% of their life left. If you throw the burning plasma now, you may think that's enough to kill the enemy, but it's not. It'll throw the enemy into the critical state, and you'll have to keep doing enough damage until you can throw another level 4 plasma shot. So in a nutshell, all of this means is that at some point you will have to throw a physical strike to eventually kill off the monster. So what makes the game so challenging? Part of it is the enemy AI. It starts off easy enough, where the enemy rarely throws a counter and practically stands there, begging you to strike them. But in about the third or fourth encounter, enemies will start throwing strikes as soon as you get in range, and they'll constantly be pushing you away with their attacks and projectiles. One of them looks like an alien version of Alf, and he'll actually run away, forcing Ultraman to run after it. The problem with this is that it's more of a setup, as 9 times out of 10, Ultraman will run right into the attack the enemy is setting up, and it's extremely difficult to evade. Later bosses are even worse. When you get to Godzilla 2, which is like an enhanced version of the first enemy, you'll just want to stop playing. It will brutally attack several times before you can even manage to throw a punch, and trying to evade attacks can nearly be impossible. But what makes these fights more challenging than they need to be? There's no real block available. Sure, you can backflip away or maybe get lucky with the shield, but let's be honest here. How good is your timing? Ultraman moves way too slowly, so the enemy may be able to catch up to you while you're backflipping. The only thing left to really talk about are the stages. Although it's not completely appealing, they do look decent. Some of them, like the destroyed city, look impressive. One cool feature is that there are no borders, so the world keeps looping. It may seem like a small thing, but it really gives you the impression that you're fighting in a massive area. It's a shame that not all of the stages have this feel to them. The ones on the plains in the volcano-like area still feel massive, but they don't have the same great look of the city-based stages. Overall, Ultraman isn't a horrible game. In fact, it feels like it could have had a lot of potential, but it was executed badly. If Ultraman moved a little bit quicker and was able to keep up with the movements of the enemy monsters, it definitely would have been more fun and I probably would have enjoyed it. But due to the stiffness and lack of true defense abilities, I couldn't even finish the 5th fight, even on a supposed easy difficulty. In fact, I didn't even notice the difference between easy and normal. Oh well. If you're into this kind of thing, feel free to give the game a shot, but otherwise, I'd say you can pass on it. Final score? 5 out of 10. This is Reaper, facebook.com/ReapersReviews. Happy fragging.